The first thing Riley Thompson tasted was blood. Warm, metallic, painfully real. The second thing she felt was the cold. Not the cold that nips at your fingers or chills your legs. This was the kind that moves like a predator, burrowing into the bones, squeezing the lungs until breathing becomes an act of defiance. Wyoming winters don't whisper, they devour. And tonight, the Granite Wolf Canyon was hungry. Wind screamed between the walls of jagged rock, whipping through snowbanks that had long since lost any softness. Shards of ice drifted sideways in the air, like broken glass caught in a storm. And in the middle of that merciless, frozen hell, a ranger hung from a half-snapped rope. Riley dangled 10 feet above a ravine so deep it swallowed light. Her wrists were bound, her jacket soaked in crimson, her head slumped forward, breath flickering like the flame of a dying candle. She did not know how long she had been unconscious. Minutes? Hours? Time had fractured into a mosaic of pain and silence. But she knew one thing with absolute clarity. She had been left for dead. The rope holding her was never meant to hold. It was meant to break. Her boots brushed empty air. Snowflakes collected in her eyelashes. She forced her eyes open. At first all she saw was darkness, pure, suffocating black. But slowly, the shapes of the canyon sharpened. The sky was an iron sheet of storm clouds. The wind howled like wolves circling a carcass. Her breath rose in thin, shaky plumes. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. Not from fear, but from memory. Her mind flashed to another world, another cold, another night. A desert ambush in Kandahar. Explosions. Screams swallowed by sand. Her partner, Mason Hale, her closest friend, pulling her behind a crumbling wall, shouting over the blast of gunfire. Then that last moment, the one she relived every night, Mason's hand slipping from hers. And then, silence. The kind of silence that follows death. A silence that had never stopped echoing in her chest. Riley shut her eyes for a moment, fighting the guilt that clawed its way up her throat. "Not now," she whispered, though her voice barely carried. "Not again." The rope creaked above her as the icy wind swung her body slightly to the left. Pain exploded through her ribs. She felt warmth trickle down her side, blood melting the snow beneath her. Through the haze, a boot print caught her eye on the edge of the cliff above her. Then another. Heavy, deliberate, unmistakable. Not hikers, not lost campers. These prints belonged to men who moved with purpose, men who had stalked the northern ranges for months, killing what they pleased, taking only trophies, leaving carcasses for wolves. Illegal trophy hunters. She had tracked them for weeks. She had found their hideouts, their traps, their bullet casings. She had cataloged every clue. What she didn't expect was for them to come for her. Her radio was missing. Her knife was missing. Her badge torn from her coat. Her attackers wanted her silent. The rope's fibers groaned again. Riley's breath froze before it even left her mouth. She was fading. Wind pushed against her like an invisible hand, swaying her back and forth. Her injuries were deep. She could feel internal bleeding pooling heavy inside her rib cage. Her fingers tingled. Her vision blurred. "How did I fall for it?" she whispered. The fake call, the panicked voice, the coordinates that matched a known trail. She walked right into their trap. She was so focused on protecting the wilderness, she forgot how ruthless the wilderness's enemies could be. Another sharp gust of wind slammed her against the canyon wall. The rope snapped a few more strands. She gasped. Her body dropped inches, the world tilting downward, the void opening beneath her. "Not like this," she muttered, teeth chattering so hard she could barely speak. "I didn't survive a war to die on a rope." But her strength was draining. Her breath became shallow. Her heartbeat began to slow. The dark pulled her back under. She drifted into half-consciousness. Somewhere in the distance, she heard a sound. A deep, rumbling snort carried by the storm. Then heavy footsteps crunching through the ice. Riley forced her eyes open. Her vision swam. Shapes merged and blurred. But she saw it. A silhouette emerging from the blizzard. Tall, broad, moving with a regal confidence no wild creature possessed. The shadows parted. And there he stood. A stallion unlike any she had ever seen. Massive. Coal-black. Muscles carved like obsidian stone. Mane whipping wildly in the wind like a living shadow. Eyes glowing eerily, like embers buried beneath ash. The Mustang that haunted whispers around Wyoming campfires. A legend, a ghost, a protector, or an omen, depending on who told the story. They called him Shadowfire. For a moment, Riley thought she was hallucinating. The cold was known to conjure spirits after all. But then the stallion snorted again. Louder, sharper, real. His hooves cracked the snow as he stepped closer. He stopped just feet from the edge of the ravine, his powerful frame illuminated in flashes of moonlight cutting through broken clouds. Even weakened, Riley could sense his intelligence. He was not panicked, not startled, not confused. He was studying her. Shadowfire tilted his head, ears flicking forward. His breath steamed in the freezing air. He took another step, and the ground trembled. Riley tried to speak, but only a weak rasp came out. "It's okay. Easy." Shadowfire's nostrils flared. He moved around the edge of the canyon with near impossible balance for an animal that size. He walked with the surety of a creature that owned this land. He circled her, slow, methodical, measuring. Riley's eyelids fluttered. She felt the darkness reach for her again. "No," she whispered. "Stay awake." But the cold was stronger than her voice. Her chin dropped to her chest. Shadowfire stepped closer. He sniffed the rope. He sniffed the blood on her jacket. He made a low sound, a deep rumbling growl no horse should be able to make, almost like disapproval or anger. Then, with a sudden movement, he reared back, snapping his front hooves into the rope above her. The fibers broke halfway. Riley's body jerked downward. Shadowfire repositioned. He bared his teeth around the rope, then clamped down with all the power of his jaws. The rope snapped. Riley fell. Cold rushed up to meet her, but she never hit the ground. Shadowfire lunged forward and shoved his massive shoulder beneath her just in time. Her body rolled against his neck and slid down to the snow, but the fall that would have killed her broke harmlessly. The stallion nudged her side gently, as if checking her breathing. Riley managed a faint smile. "Hey, boy, you're real." Her eyes closed again. Shadowfire stomped the ground, then lowered his head, forming a cradle beneath her torso. He pushed, lifted. With surprising delicacy, he maneuvered her onto his back. Her limp body slumped across him. Her arms dangled, her breath shallow. The stallion adjusted his stance and began walking. Not toward shelter, not toward open plains, but toward the only path that could lead out of the canyon alive. Snow blasted against his body. Wolves howled in the distance. The wind clawed at him. The storm raged. But Shadowfire pressed forward, step after powerful step, carrying a dying ranger through a wilderness that would have killed any other horse. Above them, the storm grew into a monster. Below them, the canyon twisted like a labyrinth. But Shadowfire never hesitated. He carried her as if he understood the weight of her life. And somewhere between the sway of his strides and the warmth of his body, Riley Thompson slipped into unconsciousness. Not from despair, but from the faintest hope. The faintest belief that she might survive the night after all. Hours earlier, before the snow swallowed the world, the ranger station had been quiet. Too quiet for Riley Thompson's liking. Most nights in early winter, the station buzzed. Hunters came in with questions about boundary lines. Travelers asked about storm warnings. Locals filed reports about missing livestock or suspicious trucks near the forest perimeter. But that evening, silence sat over the place like a weight. Riley typed her patrol notes into the database, noting the increasing number of illegal snares found near the northern grazing meadows. These hunters weren't amateurs. They were organized, coordinated. They moved like men who knew the land, or thought they owned it. Riley rubbed her temple, fighting a familiar ache behind her eyes. She didn't sleep much anymore. Nightmares didn't leave room for that. On her desk sat a photo, faded, scratched, corners peeling, of her and Mason Hale during their deployment overseas. Both wearing dusty uniforms, both smiling during the rare quiet moment between chaos. She traced the edge of the picture. "You'd tell me to rest," she muttered. But the land didn't rest. Not anymore. A crackle cut through the still air. The radio. Riley straightened in her chair, scanning the channels. "Thompson, come in. Urgent." Static drowned out the rest. Her hand hovered over the receiver. "This is Ranger Thompson. Go ahead." Nothing. Then, injured hiker. Granite Wolf Gorge. Last seen near the North Ridge. Blood loss significant. Coordinates incoming. The voice was strained, panicked. Not unusual for someone reporting an emergency. But Riley felt a pulse of unease. She had handled hundreds of distress calls. She knew voices, tones, subtleties. Something felt rehearsed. Before she could examine the instinct further, the coordinates pinged through. Granite Wolf Gorge, a dangerous place, even in spring. In winter, the steep walls and frozen waterfalls made it a maze of hidden hazards. "I copy. Heading out." Riley grabbed her gear. Radio, first aid kit, flare gun, spare thermal blanket. She put on her jacket, tightened her boots, strapped on her duty belt. As she passed the mirror on the way out, she paused. A thin scar ran along her jawline, an old reminder of shrapnel that had nearly taken half her face. In her eyes lingered something else, a shadow, a tiredness deeper than fatigue. "Not tonight," she told herself. "Focus." She stepped out into the cold. The sky was already darkening, gray clouds rolling over the peaks like heavy smoke. A storm was coming, a bad one. She secured her snow goggles and headed into the wilderness. Granite Wolf Gorge was a 2-hour hike from the station, faster if you cut through the old timberline trail, the same one the hunters used to skirt patrol boundaries. Riley walked quickly, leaving compact prints in the snow behind her. The forest around her felt tense, almost holding its breath. Birds should have been calling. Squirrels should have been rustling in the trees. But there was nothing. Like the woods knew something she didn't. Halfway down the trail, Riley stopped. The wind shifted, blowing a metallic scent toward her. Faint but unmistakable. Blood. She followed it cautiously. A splatter of crimson on snow, then another. Smears leading into the underbrush. Her instincts sharpened. The trail led nowhere near the coordinates she received. Someone was trying to draw her off course. She backed away slowly, her breath steady, her pulse tightening. Something rustled behind her. Riley spun, flashlight beams slicing through fog. A branch swayed. A crow launched itself into the air with a screech. Snow fell from a pine bough. Nothing more. But the unease grew. She returned to the trail and kept moving. 10 minutes later, the radio crackled again. "Thompson, status? Report." The voice sounded off. Too even, too measured. Not frightened, not frantic. Riley frowned. "This is Thompson. I'm en route. What's the injured hiker's condition?" Silence, then, "Critical. Please hurry." The tone flatlined into static. Her stomach tightened. She continued deeper into the gorge. The world narrowed to swirling snow, towering rock faces, and the crunch of her boots against ice. Her radio lost more signal with each step. Trees thinned, wind strengthened. The path beneath her became uneven. Granite Wolf Gorge wasn't just remote. It was dangerous by design. The ground was riddled with crevices hidden beneath layers of snow. If she wasn't careful, she could fall straight into a chasm. She slowed her pace, scanning every shadow. Something gleamed to her left. Metal. She crouched and brushed snow aside. A brass rifle casing, freshly fired. Her breath caught. Whatever was happening wasn't an accident. It was a setup. Another rustle snapped her attention forward. A dark figure moved between the trees. Riley reached for her sidearm. "Who's there? Identify yourself." No answer. She advanced slowly, steps silent, breath steady. Years of military training clicked into place. She scanned high and low, watching for movement, listening for shifts in weight, the sound of breaths, the crack of frost under boots. A faint beep came from her pocket. Her GPS. She checked the screen. The coordinates she had been given were wrong, by almost a mile. Her suspicions sharpened into certainty. Someone wanted her isolated, disoriented, vulnerable. The wind cut across her face like a blade. She tightened her hood, stepped onto a narrow ridge, and, snap, her boot hit a tripwire. Before she could react, the world flipped upside down. A hidden snare whipped around her ankle, yanking her off her feet and dragging her through the snow. She hit the ground hard, breath exploding from her chest. Then rough hands grabbed her arms. She fought, kicked, twisted, swung an elbow, but the attacker slammed her against a rock. Her vision blurred. A second man grabbed her jacket, ripping her radio from her vest. A third pinned her legs. Riley struggled to breathe, adrenaline fighting through her pain. "Let go of me! Who are you?" A voice she recognized but couldn't place echoed behind her. "Should have stayed in the station, Ranger." Her eyes adjusted just enough to see him. A tall man with a scar running from temple to jaw. One of the trophy hunters she had chased last spring. A ghost who vanished after shooting 3 wild elk out of season and dumping their bodies. He smirked. "You're bad for business." She spat blood at his boot. "You're poachers. Criminals." "Sure," he said with a shrug. "Call it what you want." He lifted the barrel of his rifle, then cracked it across her ribs. The world thinned into white-hot agony. Riley gasped, collapsing. Her knees buckled. Another blow landed across her back, sending sparks across her vision. The men worked wordlessly, efficiently. They tied her wrists, stripped her of her tools, tightened the rope around her. Riley's breath came in ragged bursts. "You're making a mistake," she whispered. "No," the scarred man replied. "We're cleaning one up." One of the men leaned close to her ear. "We know you've been tracking us. Found your notes in the station. You were going to bring in the feds. Couldn't let that happen." Her pulse hammered. "You set up the distress call." He grinned. "Glad you figured it out." Another blow. Her body folded. She tasted snow, blood, fear, rage. The men dragged her to the edge of the ravine. The drop was sickeningly deep. She tried to fight, but another punch stole her breath. The scarred man knelt beside her, tightening the rope around her wrists. "Don't take it personal. You're just in the way." He shoved her forward, and her body swung off the ledge, the rope jerking tight and wrenching her shoulders. Pain roared through her. Her scream echoed through the canyon. "You'll freeze before anyone finds you," the man said. "Storm's getting worse. Avalanche Zone 2. Wolves'll get you before dawn." Then he turned away. Boot prints marked the snow like a trail of ghosts as the men vanished into the storm. Riley hung suspended above the abyss, her breath slipping, her body shuddering. She tried to hold on, but darkness smothered her. The rope groaned, her fingers twitched. The storm howled, and the night swallowed her whole. Riley's consciousness drifted like a torn leaf in a river, pulled under, pushed up, pulled under again. The storm roared around her, muffled by the numbing haze creeping across her mind. The rope cut deeper into her wrists, with every sway, sending shocks of pain spiraling down her arms. But even pain was beginning to feel distant, fading, as if her body was surrendering to the cold. A flicker of warmth surfaced in her thoughts. Sand, sun, the distant rumble of artillery. Then, "Mason, get down!" Her partner's voice echoed across a memory she could never escape. She saw flashes, a convoy ambushed, dust clouds erupting around them, Mason pulling her behind a broken truck chassis, her own voice screaming over the deafening blasts. "Stay with me!" His hand gripping hers, tight, desperate, then slipping, until only empty air remained. Riley gasped awake. Snow stung her cheeks like needles. Her breath came in shuddering spurts. "No, not here, not again." Her voice sounded small, fragile against the roar of the blizzard. Her heart pounded, fighting the creeping numbness. She twisted her wrists. The rope burnt her skin. Her shoulders throbbed. Her strength was gone. Her hope was close behind. Another gust slammed her against the canyon wall. The rope frayed dangerously. The universe held its breath. Then, the sound. Not the howl of wind, not the creak of the rope. A breath, deep, slow, powerful, alive. A shadow moved through the white curtain of snowfall. Large, fluid, intentional. Riley's lids fluttered. Her vision blurred, but she saw him. A behemoth of a horse. Taller and broader than any she had ever encountered. Coal black from muzzle to tail. Mane flowing in the storm like living darkness. Eyes glowing with an ember-hued intensity that pierced through the night. Shadowfire. The legend whispered by ranch hands, hunters, and backcountry wanderers. A ghost horse. A guardian. A phantom. Some said he descended from war-bred Mustangs that escaped cavalry stables generations ago, surviving storms, wolves, drought, and turning wild again. Some said he appeared only to those who were marked to die. Others claimed he led lost souls back from the wilderness when all hope was gone. Riley never believed those stories. Not until now. The stallion approached with deliberate calm, hooves crunching on ice, with a rhythm as heavy and sure as a heartbeat. He stopped at the cliff's edge and peered down at her. Steam curled from his nostrils. He shook his mane, sending droplets of melted snow flying. His breath warmed the air around him, and for a moment, Riley could swear his eyes softened, as if recognizing her pain, recognizing her. Shadowfire stepped closer, testing the ground beneath his massive hooves. He lowered his head, sniffing the rope. He snorted, a deep, disapproving growl. Riley blinked slowly, the world dimming and brightening in uneven pulses. "Easy," she whispered. "Easy, boy." Her voice was barely audible, but something in her tone carried through the storm. Shadowfire circled to the top of the ledge, positioning his body carefully. The muscles along his shoulders rolled beneath his thick winter coat, powerful and deliberate. He raised his front legs and struck. His hooves hit the rope. Fibers snapped, unraveling part of the knot. Riley's body jerked violently. Pain ripped through her ribs, stealing her breath. Shadowfire struck again. This time, the rope snapped fully. But before Riley could fall into the abyss, the stallion lunged. Fast, precise, impossible for any ordinary horse. He shoved his shoulder beneath her falling body. Snow exploded around them as Riley collapsed onto his side. The warmth of his hide shocked her like a defibrillator jolt, a sudden blaze in a world of freezing blackness. Shadowfire nudged her gently, once, twice, urging her to hold on. Riley's eyes fluttered closed. "Don't leave." Shadowfire stepped over her, lowering his body just enough to slide her torso across his broad back. With a powerful grunt, he shifted, balancing her weight perfectly. He turned toward the canyon path, a narrow, treacherous trail he seemed to know instinctively. Behind them, the blizzard roared like a living beast. Ahead of them, only darkness. But Shadowfire moved with absolute certainty. Riley drifted in and out of awareness as the stallion carried her deeper into the storm. She felt the sway of his gait, the rise and fall of his breath, the warmth radiating from his muscles. Each movement echoed like a lullaby, pulling her away from the edge of death. Her mind wandered. She heard Mason's voice again, soft this time, warm, like a memory replayed under gentler skies. "Riley, you finish what I couldn't. Promise me." She had promised, but she had never believed she could keep it. Until tonight. Snow whipped against her face, pulling her back to consciousness. Shadowfire climbed a steep ridge, his hooves cracking sheets of ice. Wolves howled from the west. Branches groaned under the weight of frozen snow. The stallion ignored it all. He was a fortress, a flame moving through a world of frost. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time twisted in Riley's fading mind. She barely felt the wound in her side anymore. Numbness had spread across her limbs. Her fingers were as stiff as branches. Shadowfire sensed her weakening. He huffed sharply, shifting her weight, keeping her secure. At one point, Riley's head slipped sideways. The stallion halted, nudged her head upright with his muzzle, then continued. His instincts guided him through the forest's labyrinth. Over frozen streams, between fallen trees, across icy boulders slick with frost. Every step was intentional. Every breath from him seemed to say, "Hold on." At the edge of the Whispering Pines Valley, Riley's consciousness snapped back. A howl, close, too close. Shadowfire stopped. His ears flicked forward. His body stiffened. 3 wolves emerged through the snowdrifts. Dark gray, lean, hungry. Riley's pulse spiked weakly. "Don't fight." Shadowfire didn't listen. He lowered his head, flattening his ears. His nostrils flared. His hooves pawed the ground. A war cry rumbled from deep in his chest, a sound no domestic horse could ever make. The wolves hesitated. Shadowfire reared, front hooves slicing through the air. The wolves scattered. One darted forward. Shadowfire lunged sideways, using his body to shield Riley. The wolf snapped at his flank, but the stallion kicked with brutal speed. A crack echoed across the valley. The wolf collapsed. The others retreated quickly into the swirling snow. Shadowfire snorted triumphantly, stamped the ground to assert dominance, then returned to Riley, nudging her back into position. Her eyes watered from the cold and the shock. "You're, something else," she whispered. The stallion grunted as if agreeing. He continued his march. As they ascended the ridge separating Granite Wolf Gorge from the lower valley, the storm reached its peak. Snow hammered the world in sheets. The wind screamed through pine branches like sirens. Ice cracked beneath Shadowfire's weight, threatening to break open. But he moved without hesitation. Riley's mind blurred. Her thoughts slowed. Her breathing faltered. She heard Mason again. "Riley, keep going." But she was so tired. The cold pulled her like a tide. Her head slumped. Her grip loosened. Shadowfire felt it immediately. He halted, turned his massive head, nudged her, soft but urgent. She didn't respond. Shadowfire nudged harder. Still nothing. In a sudden burst of determination, he pressed his muzzle against her cheek, warm breath enveloping her frozen skin. Her eyelids flickered. "Stay," she whispered. Shadowfire's ears pricked forward. He lifted his head high. For the first time, he seemed uncertain, as if weighing the fragility of the human life draped across him. Then, he made a decision. He shifted his stance, lowered his body slightly, digging his hooves into the unstable slope. And he charged, not with recklessness, but with urgency. Every muscle in his body moved like a piston. His strides grew longer, faster, powerful enough to tear through drifts half his height. He pushed forward, carrying Riley through the final leg of the journey, toward a dim light glowing faintly through the storm. The old Ranger way station, a lifeline in the wilderness. Shadowfire reached it, just as Riley's eyes rolled back completely. He slammed his body against the door until it cracked open. Inside, the emergency lantern flickered. Shadowfire crouched slightly, letting Riley slide down onto the snow just inside the doorway. He stood over her, chest rising and falling like a blacksmith's bellows, frost clinging to his mane. He waited, watched, guarded, until Riley took one final shallow breath, and the world went dark again. For a long while, Riley lay motionless on the cold floor of the way station. Silence pressed in around her. The storm slammed against the wooden walls like an angry beast trying to claw its way inside. Snow blew through the broken doorway. The emergency lantern flickered weakly, casting unsteady shadows across the cramped room. Then her chest rose, barely, but it rose. Shadowfire stood over her, head bowed, mane dripping with melted ice. His breath fogged the cold air in thick clouds. He nudged her shoulder once, then again, gentler the second time, almost reverently. Riley's eyes blinked open. Darkness blurred into faint orange light. Pain sharpened in her ribs, forcing a gasp from her lungs. You brought me back," she whispered barely above a breath. Shadowfire pulled his head back slightly, as if acknowledging her words. Her hands trembled as she gripped the floor and pushed herself into a sitting position. The room spun violently. She steadied herself against the wall, biting down against the agony. Her body was a map of injuries. Her wrists were raw and bloodied. Her ribs felt cracked. Her vision doubled every few seconds. Hypothermia clawed at her muscles, but she was alive. Alive because a wild Mustang, a ghost of the Wyoming backcountry, chose to defy instinct and save her. Riley forced herself onto her knees. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She crawled to the first aid cabinet and pulled it open. Supplies spilled out: bandages, antiseptic, thermal blankets. With shaking hands, she wrapped her ribs, disinfected cuts, and forced down a packet of emergency glucose. Her body screamed in protest. Her head pounded. But her mind, clearer now, focused on one truth. She couldn't stay here. Not with what she knew. Not with who had attacked her. The trophy hunters weren't just poachers. They were orchestrating something bigger, something deadly. And her ambush wasn't a warning. It was a silencing. Riley took several steadying breaths, trying to gather strength. She pulled herself upright by gripping the wall. Her legs trembled. Her vision tilted. But she stayed on her feet. She limped toward the door. Shadowfire blocked her path. Riley leaned against the doorframe, exhaling sharply. "Easy, boy. I'm not going far." Shadowfire shifted aside, but not fully. His body remained angled toward her protectively. Riley stepped outside into the snow-blanketed clearing. The storm had weakened, but not ended. Wind still whipped through the pines. Ice crunched beneath her boots. She scanned the area. Footprints, tire tracks, broken branches. The trophy hunters had been here. But something else caught her eye near the side of the cabin, something glinting faintly beneath a layer of drifting snow. She limped over and brushed the snow away. A metal casing, still warm. Someone had fired a shot here recently. Her pulse spiked. She crouched farther, brushing more snow aside. Boot prints, 3 sets. Heavy, deep, directed. They had come back. They had waited. And they were still close. Riley's breath fogged the air. She straightened slowly, ignoring the stabbing pain crossing her ribs. Shadowfire stepped beside her, ears flicking sharply. He sensed it too. Movement. Not far. Not friendly. Riley backed toward the cabin and shut the door. She braced a chair beneath the handle. Her mind raced through possibilities. She needed weapons, a way to call for backup, proof of the ambush. A plan before the hunters returned. Her eyes fell on the broken radio transmitter she found earlier lying on a shelf. One of the poachers must have dropped it in their haste. She picked it up. Inside the casing, a SIM chip, and taped beneath it coordinates, names, schedules, drop points. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't just a small-time poaching ring. This was a network, organized, funded, dangerous. And now they knew she had seen too much. Riley clutched the papers. She needed to expose them. Tonight. If she waited until morning, she might never make it out alive. She pocketed the evidence. Suddenly, a loud crunch outside. Riley froze. Shadowfire stiffened, every muscle tightening. Then, headlights. A pair of blinding beams cut through the storm, stopping just yards from the cabin. A truck engine growled. Doors slammed. Heavy boots hit the ground. Voices shouted, "We know she's here!" Check everywhere. She couldn't have gone far, Riley cursed under her breath. She loaded the flare gun, the only weapon she had left. The door rattled violently. Shadowfire reared, slamming his hooves against the floor. His scream pierced the air. A primal, thunderous declaration. The hunters laughed. "There's the ghost stallion! Take him out first. Riley's blood ran cold. They weren't just after her. They wanted Shadowfire too. A crack of a rifle split the air. Shadowfire jerked, but the bullet only grazed his shoulder. He charged the window, shattering it with his massive body and bolting outside before Riley could stop him. "No!" she shouted, stumbling after him. But Shadowfire wasn't fleeing. He was attacking. Outside, the world exploded into chaos. The stallion plowed through the snowdrifts like a locomotive, barreling straight toward the nearest hunter. The man shrieked, scrambling to aim, but Shadowfire struck him with his shoulder, knocking him to the ground. Riley dove behind a snowbank as gunfire erupted. Bullets sliced through the air. Snow burst into white plumes. The hunters shouted orders. "On the left! Cut him off! Drop the ranger!" Shadowfire wheeled around, hooves slamming the ground with thunderous force. He charged another hunter, forcing the man to roll out of the way and drop his rifle. Riley spotted the discarded weapon and sprinted toward it. But pain shot through her leg, and she stumbled, falling to her knees. A hunter appeared at the ridge above her, aiming his gun. "End of the line, Ranger!" A shot rang out. He jerked backward, hit square in the chest by a flare. Riley exhaled shakily. She hadn't missed. Shadowfire kicked another man's weapon deeper into the snow, buying her seconds. The remaining hunter, the scarred leader, raised his rifle and aimed straight at the stallion. Riley screamed, "No!" She lunged toward him, crashing into his back. The shot went wide. The two grappled violently, rolling down an icy slope. Her ribs screamed in agony. His elbow smashed against her jaw. Her vision blurred. He pinned her. "You should have stayed dead," he snarled, pressing the rifle barrel against her throat. Riley clawed at the snow, desperate. The man sneered. "You're finished, and so is that damn horse." He lifted the rifle. A roar exploded behind him. Shadowfire. The stallion charged down the slope with terrifying speed, eyes blazing with fury. He rammed into the hunter, throwing him off Riley and slamming him into a snowbank. The man dropped his gun. His head struck a rock. He went limp. For a moment, the world went quiet, except for the wind and Riley's ragged breathing. Shadowfire stood over the unconscious poacher, pawing the ground, daring him to move. Riley crawled to the rifle, checked the chamber. It was empty. Sirens wailed in the distance. "Back up. Finally!" She collapsed against the snow, breath shaking, body trembling. Shadowfire stepped beside her, lowering his head to hers. Warm breath washed over her cheek. "You saved my life twice," she murmured. She reached out and rested her hand against his neck. The sirens grew louder. Lights flashed through the trees. The cavalry had arrived, and they found a crime scene that spoke for itself. Riley held the evidence tight in her fist as officers surrounded the clearing. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Shadowfire stood beside her like a guardian carved from midnight, unflinching as the world finally caught up. She was alive. The poachers were finished. And the truth, every grisly piece of it, was finally in the open. The storm had finally broken. By the time the last of the trophy hunters were being loaded into patrol trucks, hands bound, heads lowered, curses swallowed by flashing lights, the first pale tones of dawn stretched across the Wyoming sky. Frost clung to the pines in delicate crystals. The horizon glowed amber, bleeding into bruised blue clouds that drifted apart after a long, brutal night. And in the center of that clearing, surrounded by law enforcement officers, medics, and the remnants of violence, Riley Thompson sat on a stretcher, staring at the giant black Mustang who refused to leave her side. Shadowfire stood perfectly still, a monolith of muscle and intelligence. Steam curled from his nostrils. His mane rippled softly in the morning breeze. The grays wound on his shoulder had stopped bleeding, but dried streaks of crimson still clung to his dark coat, like war paint. Riley reached out weakly. Shadowfire stepped forward, meeting her hand halfway. Warmth, steady, alive. One of the medics glanced at the stallion nervously. "You sure you're safe around him, Ranger?" Riley gave a tired half-smile. "He's the only reason I'm still breathing." The medic nodded silently, recognizing a bond he had no place interrupting. As officers collected evidence and prepared statements, Riley sat wrapped in a thermal blanket, the rising sun slowly thawing the night's chill from her bones. Her ribs were tightly bandaged. Her left arm had been immobilized to keep tendon damage from worsening. One eye was bruised, her lips split, her breath shallow, but she was alive. Her mind drifted, replaying the night in fragments. The snare, the ambush, the rope, the fall. Then, Shadowfire's glowing eyes cutting through the darkness. The stallion pulling her from the jaws of death with an intelligence more human than animal. A deputy approached, her boots crunching softly on the snow. "Ma'am, do you mind answering a few questions?" Riley nodded slowly. "I'll try." The deputy raised her notepad. "We've got 3 men in custody, 1 unconscious, 2 with minor injuries. They're connected to a larger poaching ring we've been trying to nail for months. We couldn't have done it without you." Riley shook her head. "You couldn't have done it without him." She inclined her head toward Shadowfire. The deputy followed her gaze. A mixture of awe and unease crossed her features. "That is one hell of a horse," she murmured. Riley's lips tugged into a faint smile. "He's more than that. But—" The deputy cleared her throat. "What's his story? Is he tame? Owned?" "No," Riley whispered. "He's wild." The deputy's eyebrows rose. "And yet, he saved your life." Riley nodded. "He chose to." The deputy scribbled something down. "Well, for what it's worth, the state owes him a medal too." Riley chuckled once, then winced from the pain it sparked in her ribs. Shadowfire huffed, as if scolding her for making unnecessary noise. The deputy smiled stiffly and walked away. A ranger captain approached next. He was older, with a square jaw, silver hair, and the kind of posture that suggested he had spent 4 decades patrolling these mountains without ever taking a sick day. "Thompson," he said quietly. Riley looked up. "I heard what happened." Riley exhaled. "Sir, I should have seen it coming." "We don't blame you," he replied, voice firm. "You followed a distress call. That's your job. What those men did was deliberate, professional. You survived something that was meant to kill you." He paused, eyes drifting toward the black Mustang standing sentinel beside her. "And you had help." Riley looked at Shadowfire with an expression torn between gratitude and disbelief. "He saved me," she said simply. No hesitation. He risked everything just to keep me alive. The captain studied the horse thoughtfully. "You know, I've heard stories about a stallion like this. Hunters claimed he disrupted their traps. Campers swear he guided them out of storms. Some even said he watched them from the ridges at night." "He's intelligent," Riley whispered. "More than that," the captain said. "He's aware." A long silence stretched between them. "You know you're going to be on mandatory medical leave for a while," he added. "I figured," Riley said, attempting humor. "Doesn't look like I'll be outrunning anyone for a bit." The captain's tone softened. "But when you're back..." I want you leading the task force. The evidence you recovered? He lowered his voice. It's enough to expose the entire trophy hunting network. Not just here, across 3 states. Riley's pulse quickened. She thought of Mason, of the promise she made years ago, of the guilt she carried like armor. Thank you, sir, she said. I won't let you down. I know you won't. He nodded once. Now get some rest. You look like you've gone 12 rounds in a boxing ring. The captain stepped away. Riley took a long breath, exhaustion pulling at her bones, but she wasn't done yet. She turned to the stallion. Shadowfire's eyes met hers, deep, ember-like, ancient. What you did, she swallowed hard. I won't ever be able to repay you. Shadowfire lifted his head proudly, blowing warm air across her face as if rejecting the idea of debt. A strange, quiet moment washed over them. A moment heavy with unspoken understanding. A bond forged in blood, pain, and survival. But as medics prepared the transport vehicle, Riley noticed something. Shadowfire's stance faltered slightly, just for a moment. He had been wounded. The graze on his shoulder was nothing critical, but the relentless night, the fight, the cold, it had taken a toll. The stallion's breath hitched as he shifted weight from one leg to the other. Riley's heart clenched. She stepped toward him. Hey, easy. Let me look. The Mustang snorted defensively, pulling his shoulder away, but Riley walked closer, hands raised gently. She examined the wound. It wasn't deep, but it burned red against his dark coat. The cold had slowed the bleeding, but infection was possible. Her voice cracked. You stubborn guardian! You risked everything for me. Shadowfire blinked slowly, ears tilting back slightly, as if reassuring her. Riley reached up, resting her forehead lightly against his. Her cold breath mingled with his warm exhale. You're not dying on me, she whispered. Not after everything you did. Her voice wavered. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. Shadowfire pressed into her touch. A medic approached cautiously. We can treat him at the ranger rehab shelter, he said, but only if he lets us near him. He won't go, another ranger muttered skeptically. He's wild, untamed. This horse answers to no one. But Riley shook her head. He'll come. Without looking away, she placed a hand on Shadowfire's cheek. You'll follow me, won't you? Shadowfire huffed, pawing the snow with one massive hoof. Then slowly, he stepped forward, closer to her. Everyone fell silent. Riley smiled painfully. That's my boy. They allowed Shadowfire to walk beside the medic truck as they drove back toward the main ranger station. The stallion refused any trailer or containment, and nobody dared force him. He walked like a king beside a caravan of trucks and officers, a living sentinel of the Wyoming frontier. When they arrived at the station, the sky had transformed into a blaze of early morning gold. The world looked untouched, innocent, as if the night had never happened. Riley was helped inside for further treatment. Her ribs were confirmed fractured in 2 places, her shoulder sprained, her blood pressure unstable, but she was alive. After receiving the necessary care, the first thing she asked was, "The horse, where is he?" The medic pointed outside. Riley limped to the window. Shadowfire stood alone in the clearing, watching the station with unwavering intensity. He had allowed them to clean his wound, but the moment they finished, he moved away from human hands. He stood tall, silent, proud, as if guarding her. Riley pressed her palm against the glass. "You saved me," she whispered. "I won't forget." Shadowfire's ears twitched. He turned his head toward the mountains, toward the wilderness that was his birthright. Riley's chest tightened. "Don't go," she murmured. But she knew. Wild is wild. A creature like him doesn't belong behind fences or under reins. He was the forest's guardian, Wyoming's shadow sentinel. And he had a territory to defend. Riley stepped outside despite protests from medics. The cold bit her lungs, but she ignored it. She walked slowly toward the stallion. Every step was a firestorm of pain, but she didn't stop. When she reached him, she rested her hand against his chest. Shadowfire lowered his head slightly, acknowledging her. Their breaths mingled in the morning air, one white, one warm. "Thank you," she said again, her voice barely holding. "For my life. For fighting for me when nobody else could reach me. For reminding me I still have a purpose." Shadowfire nudged her shoulder gently. Her eyes brimmed, not with pain, but with something she had forgotten she could feel. Hope. "Go," she whispered softly. Shadowfire stepped back. His muscles tensed. His head rose high. His mane danced in the wind. He looked at her one last time. A gaze filled with meaning she would spend years trying to understand. Then he turned. With a powerful burst, the stallion galloped across the clearing. Snow flew behind him in glittering arcs. His silhouette carved against the golden sunrise like a living myth. He disappeared into the trees. Back to the land that shaped him. Back to the shadows. Back to the wild. Riley stood watching long after he was gone. Her chest ached. Her ribs burned. But her soul, for the first time since Mason's death, felt light. She pulled the evidence file from her jacket. Pages of coordinates, names, transactions, routes. It was enough to dismantle the trophy hunting network for good. Enough to honor the promise she made long ago. "Mason," she whispered to the morning sky, "I'm finally doing it." She turned toward the ranger station, toward justice, healing, and a future she no longer feared. Behind her, the forest remained still. Then, from the distant line of pines, a lone, haunting call echoed through the valley. A mustang's cry. Strong, defiant, alive. Riley smiled. Shadowfire was still watching, still protecting, still guarding the land he ruled. And deep down, she knew. Their paths would cross again.